Ahoy there, Bradford here. And before we get into this episode, I just want to be sure you know that the How Not to Sail Season 3 party is going to be next Sunday, July 14th. I'll have more info at the end of the episode about what guests we got and what's going on, but for now, I just want to make sure you know a couple of things. One is to get the Zoom link to join the party and get your virtual raffle tickets, you need to go to hownottosail.com/party. And just drop your name and email in there. This is not the same as the main How Not to Sail email list, and it's just for this event. So hop on that. And the second thing is to check your inbox right after that and be sure to click in the confirmation email so the robots will send you the Zoom link. Big thanks to patrons Pirate Dave, Neil, Bill, Reed, Tal, Julie, and Mark for jumping on the sign-up lickety-split after the patrons' release of this episode went out. Which I guess reminds me of a third thing. If you've been considering joining the awesome Patreon How Not to Sail crew, this is a great time since you'll get one or more extra virtual raffle tickets, and we're about to have an Atlanta patrons meetup shortly. Okay, that's enough for now, so just let me push play here, and we're rolling. Okay, so we have an unusual show for you this episode. So when I need to get out, I have to do this sort of gymnastic walk along the inside wall until my feet are back on the cabin sole. 'Cause what could be better than an audio tour of the boat? As you may or may not know, I just finished a week of being pretty much completely unplugged aboard the vessel.
Probably just getting a little diesel exhaust particles out of my nose.
Which you can bet is going to be featured in the near future.
Like the petrel before the storm, I arrive bringing the shit.
But being unplugged and all, I don't have all those mountains of audio sorted out yet.
So what we're going to do today is take a brief tour of the vessel, audio style. And I'm going to try and do it all in one take, which should really challenge my OCD tendencies.
This is not the usual episode, so if you're new to the podcast, I'd recommend maybe checking it out from episode 58, or even from episode 1. But who am I to tell you what to do?
By the way, yes, the end of season party is coming up soon,
which I'll have more details about at the end.
Big thanks to Brad and Ed for calling in help to get the ball rolling.
Hey, Bradford, it's Brad, and I need to party.
Bradford, it is Ed Pickering, the broker with the beard, up here in
I think you can hear him on the last episode, 60. Anyway, I'm here at the marina getting ready to walk onto my pier.
We have the newfangled electronic gate here, which I kind of hate. It's probably more secure than the old mechanical key, but it's also a lot more invasive to privacy and more complicated when it messes up.
I gotta say, I've never been one of those guys railing against corporations, but I'm not a fan of where a lot of marinas are going these days.
And I'll just leave it at that for now, but please feel free to weigh in the comments at hownottosail.com/61. All right, walking down the pier here, and I see Bernie's boat's back.
I don't see Bernie's boat out much, but he does have a lot of sage advice.
He was out for a haul out.
But irregardless, as my friend Bill would say, here we are at the vessel.
And thankfully right now the tide is just about perfect for boarding.
We have fixed piers instead of floating piers at the marina, so sometimes the boat's as high as 2.5 feet up higher than the dock, which makes for a nice big step.
Gonna grab the shrouds here. I'm on the side deck. Walking back to duck under the bimini into the cockpit.
Looking forward, I see the Dodger we added to the boat, which landlubbers might call a windshield. It works pretty well, and it's got a low profile, meaning the top bar is right in my line of sight when I'm standing at the helm.
So now I'm ducking under the Dodger and stepping into the companionway. And the first thing I step on is a flat wooden step on top of the galley counter. And then down 2 more steps, which are on the engine cover. And I'm standing looking forward at a messy cabin that I still need to organize. Stuff strewn about the starboard and port settees. I'm going to stretch over here to the nav station and turn off the air conditioning for just long enough for this tour, I hope.
Did I mention it's hot in Florida in June? Anyway, the first thing you basically get to when you step down into the cabin is the galley.
In the galley here is the gimbaled 2-burner stove with a wooden chopping block that fits on top of it.
The stove is up against the starboard hull, which, in case there's a quiz, is on the right when you come down into the cabin.
In front of me, just slightly to the right of center, is a double sink. And next to the wall, a square cutout that you lift up to get to dishes and pots and pans and stuff.
Sometimes I cook when I'm cruising, but this trip I decided to make things easy. I figured I'd bring a couple boxes of cereal for breakfast, some berries and bananas and cinnamon, plus some power bars and protein drinks for lunch or to snack on as needed.
Those things, along with milk and almond milk, I keep in the fridge, which is under this other square hatch in the back right corner of the galley. I've got 3 bags of ice in here as well to help regulate the temperature.
If you've had a marine refrigerator or reefer before, you know that keeping things the right temperature in there is a bit of a crapshoot. Some things may get frozen and other things may not stay cool enough. But in this heat here in June in Florida, staying cool enough is mostly the issue.
I can tell you that keeping the reefer full is a big help in keeping things cool. And of course, where in the fridge you put things makes a big difference. Lower down and closer to where the cold air comes out of the ice box is, wait for it, going to be colder. But this trip is kind of low maintenance, so I just set the bags of ice on the bottom of the space here and set the other things on top, and they stayed about how I wanted them, refrigerated but not frozen.
And finally, on the aft countertop between the refrigerator and the companionway step,
is where a bunch of crap tends to collect when I'm on a short cruise like this one.
I don't leave stuff on the counter surface right under the companionway because that section slides off if I need to look at the engine from the top or get a good light on it. But on the 20-inch square between that and the fridge hatch, I currently have
a battery-powered distress beacon, 3 headlamps, a charger and cable for GoPro batteries, my Zoom H1N pocket recorder, a Kershaw knife, a bottle of aloe on its side, an empty refillable filtered water bottle, a rechargeable power brick, a laminated copy of Rules of the Road to remind me how many whistles mean passing to port or starboard. Not that anybody else in the ICW is going to know what they mean.
And last, but certainly not least, a little orange and black doodad about the size of a rounded deck of cards, which is my spot messenger.
Now this thing I may need to link to in the show notes because it rocks.
It's not an EPIRB, which they say you should have if you're making an offshore passage or something. An EPIRB will send your position and a distress signal to the Coast Guard if you manually activate it, or in some cases if it goes in the water.
This spot messenger is like an EPIRB in that it tracks the position of this unit by satellite, but in the event of an emergency, if you push the button, it just goes to a third-party call center, which for my purposes so far is plenty adequate.
The main use for me is not to report an emergency, which I try studiously to avoid having, but to let the Admiral or certain close friends and family know where I'm at when I'm out cruising.
You can send your track at regular intervals. You can also send a ping that says basically, here's my location and I'm okay, so don't freak out if it looks like I'm stopped in a weird place. And that's in addition to the need some help and SOS buttons.
So I'll put a link to this spot messenger in the show notes as soon as I can type them down.
And I should say, hit me up in the comments at hownottosale.com/61 if you're looking at one of these. Mine is actually about 10 years old, and looks like this model number is PT2, like Papa Tango 2.
I really like this unit. It doesn't have two-way messaging like some of the newer ones may have, but it's also only about $150 a year for the service plan, I think. It works like a champ for my needs. Of course, you can use it for hiking and stuff like that, and I think it's waterproof to some degree. It's got a gasket. So I'm putting this in my mental collection of things that work. Okay, let's talk party, shall we? The How Not to Sale end-of-season online party is going to be Sunday, July 14th at 1:30 p.m. with a patrons pre-party at 12:45. If you've been part of it before, you know we have a great time. We're going to have some special guests I'll say more about in the outro today, as well as some giveaways, trivia, and even, God willing, a special musical guest. But you need to go to hownottosale.com/party to RSVP so you can get the Zoom link and to get a virtual raffle ticket for the giveaways. Again, that's hownottosale.com/party, and I'll see you there. Anyway, we probably better move on and wrap up this audio tour before I sweat to death.
Across from the galley on the port side is the quarter berth, or as the Admiral calls it, the coffin. There's a sliding door here, which I basically never use.
In here we've got a bed and I guess you'd say a dresser of sorts with some cabinets and a drawer along the hull.
And I keep our harnesses and safety gear in the lower cabinet here.
And aft of that, on top of the fuel tank actually, and below the port side cockpit seat, is a single berth. And that's where I sleep.
Yep. Just getting in the berth. Okay.
So my feet go toward the aft end and my head is toward the cabinet and the exit.
So when I need to get out, I have to do this sort of gymnastic walk along the inside wall until my feet are back on the cabin sole. And I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, such as it is. All right. Getting out of here. So just on the other side of the quarter berth bulkhead here is the rear-facing nav desk. It's got the typical lift top, so you can put charts and stuff in the desk. Above it, on the bulkhead, is a small flat-screen TV I've never used, probably at least 15 years old. Below that is a shelf filled with all kinds of clutter right now. We got koozies, a bottle with spare screws and bits of hardware that probably should be on something. Lip balm, gloves. And as I'm sitting at the nav desk, I'm actually sitting on the aft end of the short port side settee, or couch as you prefer. Along the hull on my right, as I'm facing aft, we have some cabinets with books and a small microwave. Yep.
And I've got to give credit for an ingenious idea here. The first time the Admiral and I went out into the Gulf, we ran into what she calls the washing machine. And among other things we discovered after getting thrashed about and beating a hasty retreat was that everything that was in the cabinets was no longer in the cabinets, but rather on the floor.
And this is where our friend Dave came in the picture. We looked at some latches to keep the cabinets closed, and there is indeed such a thing, and the style is commonly referred to as a finger breaker among nautical types, because you stick your finger into a little hole to unlatch them, which can cause some issues at sea, as the name suggests.
Worse yet, they are insanely expensive if you want to put them on well over a dozen cabinets and doors. So what Dave came up with was something I initially resisted as being terribly unstylish, but which have proven their mettle for years.
And what he came up with was some tough fabric pull tabs with snaps on them, like we have on the companionway cover.
The pull tabs are black and attached on the inside of the cabinet door frame.
And the snaps are on the front and fairly inconspicuous. And I can't say I've been in a hurricane or anything, but this setup so far has been 100% effective in some choppy seas.
So if you want to know more about these ingenious little tabs, or you have your own better solution for keeping your cabinets shut when things are a little choppy, hit me up in the comments at hownottosale.com/61, just down at the bottom of the show notes there.
That may be a little geeky, but I'm putting that in the things that work category along with the Spot Messenger. Guess we could put this whole 1983 Hunter Cherubini and its Yanmar engine in that category as well, since the whole vessel has taken a beating from me and it keeps on ticking.
Anyway, let's round out the tour before I melt.
We've got another settee, a longer one, across on the starboard side of the cabin, which you can make into a bed by putting the backrest down next to it.
In between the settees in the middle of the cabin is a fold-out table.
And the center section here has some storage and is just wide enough to store gallon jugs of water or whatever you might want to store in there.
The mast goes through the forward end of the table and down through the cabin sole where it's bolted to the keel.
Up forward past that as I duck my head, and on the left we have a sink and cabinet. There's no water supply for the sink currently, for reasons I won't get into. But the cabinet does have the old snap closure there. And to the right, we have the head compartment, where all the important business gets done.
Except for at the moment, since I keep replacing the joker valve and still having backflow, which is no fun. So I try 100% to use shore facilities for anything I can't direct overboard.
Shower's also in here, and it also doesn't have a water supply at the moment, so it's kind of a storage area. And further forward on the left side, almost to the V-berth, is something that the Admiral talked me into keeping, and boy was she right. This closet, I understand, was originally a closet, but then one of the previous owners put an air conditioning unit in here.
That's right, central air. And given that it's insanely hot where we have the boat now, it's essential for comfort. So whatever hanging storage we might have had in the closet, we can manage without.
Speaking of air conditioning, I need to turn that sucker back on ASAP, so I'll just say that forwardmost here we have the V-berth, which when I'm here solo is pretty much used for storage. Got snorkeling and dive gear, used laundry hamper, sea bags, cushions, fenders, 2 Tupperware tubs of parts and stuff.
And that is pretty much my ad hoc, quick, stem-to-stern tour of the inside of a cruising sailboat.
Okay, walking back astern, I'm making sure not to hit my head on the cabin doorway. I'm coming back to the nav desk area and flipping the AC switch back on. And with that, I bid you adieu until next time. I want to thank the Admiral profusely for looking after things so I could go on walkabout for a week. Thanks, of course, to our awesome Patreon patrons. And if you've been thinking about joining the Patreon crew, right now before the party is a great time to do so.
Couldn't have said it better myself a couple of weeks ago on the boat. And in addition to the usual Patreon perks, and of course the satisfaction of knowing you're helping expose your fellow travelers to the joys of How Not to Sail, you'll be getting some extra tickets to the virtual raffle at the party, the grand booby prize of which will be a day sail aboard JC Sails. And we'll be having an Atlanta meetup for the first time pretty soon. And you don't even have to remember how to find the Patreon sign up, because when you go to hownottosale.com/party to RSVP for next Sunday's online party, put in your name and email and click submit, you'll automatically jump to a page that includes a link to the How Not to Sail Patreon page, just in case you're curious. Anyway, you get the picture. Before I leave the party topic, though, I just need to make sure to mention some important info. First, you gotta click on the link in the party confirmation email to make sure you get the Zoom link and get registered for one or more virtual raffle tickets. Everybody that does that by the end of Monday will get an extra ticket, and patrons will get one or more extra tickets based on your Patreon level. The second thing is, when you click on the Zoom link before 1:25 p.m. Eastern Time next Sunday the 14th, you'll probably get a barely discernible message on screen that says something like, "We're notifying the host that you're here." And that's about all that you'll see until the Admiral starts letting people in, which she'll be doing at 1:25 p.m. Sunday for the main party and just before 12:45 p.m. for the patrons pre-party. If you have any issues between now and then, just hit me up at bradford@hownottosail.com. I'm going to try and keep an eye out on Sunday for any last-minute issues, but as you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of moving parts, so feel free to test the link before then and make sure you have Zoom installed and that it's not bugging you for updates or anything, like you've probably done a zillion times over the last couple of years. Okay, as I alluded to in the last episode or two, I want to maybe start doing what we might call a Coconut Telegraph segment at the end of episodes where, among other things, I share some news on what you're up to. And I'd love your feedback on this, but let me just go ahead and demonstrate by doing, and by the way, this is not going to be the permanent music, it's okay, but not great. Anyway, Captain Boomies is crushing it on Instagram. She just had like a zillion hits on her most recent videos, so major congrats to Captain Boomies. You can find her on Instagram at Captain Boomies, go figure, and CaptainBoomies.com. Our friend Jim is currently biking across the United States, which is almost like cruising, so I can hopefully keep you updated on that. And I want to wish a happy day to our buddy and sailing master patron, Mark. All right, that's kind of a sample of what I wanted to do in the Coconut Telegraph segment, but maybe a little longer in the future. So if you have anything you'd like to share, just hit me up at bradford@hownottosail.com or leave a message on the How Not to Sailor hotline at 770-458-3838, and I aim to include it here. And we're totally going long on this one, so I'll just cut back to my location recording here and say, meanwhile, make sure you don't get overheated, and I'll see you next time on How Not to Sail. Screwing up is part of cruising. Let me show you how.